They found me bleeding in the ashes of our family's ancestral shrine, clutching the severed head of the man who murdered my younger brother. My father's voice still echoes in my mind. "You're no daughter of mine." 3 words that shattered 20 years of devotion, spoken as he watched me burn our family's sacred bloodline contracts to save a village of peasants he deemed expendable. That was the night House Blackthorne disowned me. That was the night I stopped being their perfect, obedient daughter and became something far more dangerous. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it really started. With my brother Cassius finding something he shouldn't have, and me being too naive to realize our family was built on bones. "Lyra, you need to see this." Cassius's voice was shaking when he burst into my chambers that night, clutching a bundle of papers like they were venomous snakes. I looked up from my embroidery. Gods, I actually used to do embroidery, and raised an eyebrow. "What's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" "Worse." He spread the documents across my vanity table, knocking over my ridiculous collection of perfume bottles. "I found these in Father's study. Look at the signatures." The papers were shipping manifests. Boring stuff, really, until I saw what was being shipped. Not grain, not weapons, children. Hundreds of them. Listed like cattle with ages, descriptions, and something called conditioning status. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. "War orphans," Cassius said, his face pale as winter frost. "From the frontier campaigns. They're not being sent to orphanages, Lyra. They're being sold." My hands started shaking. Sold to who? "Whoever pays the most, labor camps, brothels, fighting pits." He pointed to a signature at the bottom that made my blood freeze. "Look who's authorizing the shipments." Father's elegant script stared back at me, and below it, the family seal. "There has to be an explanation," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, they tasted like ash. Maybe he doesn't know. "Lyra," Cassius grabbed my shoulders. "He's the one organizing it. The entire noble council is in on this. They're using the wars as cover to traffic children." I stared at those papers until the words blurred together. All those charity galas we'd attended. All those speeches about supporting our brave soldiers and caring for war victims. All of it had been a lie. "We have to stop this," I said. Cassius nodded grimly. "I already sent word to Captain Vex at the garrison. He's got contacts in the capital who can—" The door to my chambers exploded inward, not opened, exploded. Father stood there with 6 guards, his face a mask of cold fury. "Hello, children," he said in that deceptively calm voice that had always terrified me more than screaming. "Having a nice chat?" "Father, we can explain," I started. "Oh, I'm sure you can." He gestured to the guards. "Secure the documents." As they moved toward my vanity, Cassius stepped in front of them. "Don't you dare." "Move aside, boy." "No." My little brother, gods, he was barely 18, stood his ground against 6 armed men. "I won't let you cover this up." Father's expression didn't change. "Very well." The dagger appeared in his hand so fast I almost missed it. Cassius didn't even have time to scream before it slid between his ribs. "No!" I lunged forward, but the guards grabbed me, holding me back as my brother collapsed to the floor. "Cassius!" I struggled against their grip, watching the light fade from his eyes. "You bastard! You killed him!" "An unfortunate accident," Father said, wiping the blade clean on his sleeve. "The boy tripped and fell on his own hunting knife. Quite tragic, really." "I'll tell everyone," I snarled. "I'll expose all of you." Father smiled then, the expression so cold it could have frozen hellfire. "Will you? And who would believe the hysterical ravings of a grief-stricken girl, especially when she's been so unstable lately?" One of the guards produced a syringe. I felt the needle bite into my neck, and the world started to spin. "Sleep, daughter." Father's voice seemed to come from very far away. "When you wake up, you'll have forgotten all about this unfortunate misunderstanding." But I didn't forget. I never forgot. 3 days later, I woke up in my bed with a story already prepared for me. Cassius had died in a hunting accident. I'd suffered a terrible shock and couldn't remember the details clearly. Everyone was very understanding about my confusion, except I remembered everything. The funeral was beautiful. All the right people said all the right things about what a promising young man Cassius had been. Father gave a moving eulogy about his beloved son's tragic accident. I stood there in my black dress, holding a single white rose, and planned my revenge. It took me 2 weeks to find where they were keeping the children. The warehouse district, naturally. 47 kids between the ages of 6 and 16, locked in cages like animals. They'd been drugged to keep them docile, but I could see the terror in their eyes. "Hey," I whispered to a girl who couldn't have been older than 8. "What's your name?" "Mira," she whispered back. "Are you here to take us away?" "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm going to get you out of here." That's when the guards found me. "Well, well," said their leader, a scarred brute named Corvin. "Look what we have here, the little Blackthorne princess." I straightened up, trying to channel every ounce of noble authority I'd ever learned. "Release these children immediately." Corvin laughed. "Or what? You'll tell your daddy?" "My father doesn't know about this," I said, which was technically true if you ignored the part where he was running the whole operation. "Oh, sweetheart." Corvin's grin turned nasty. "Your daddy's the one who pays our salaries." That's when I realized that all those dancing lessons Mother had insisted on weren't really dancing lessons at all. The first guard went down when I broke his nose with the palm of my hand. The second got a knee to the solar plexus that dropped him like a stone. Corvin reached for his sword, but I was already moving, muscle memory taking over. Mother's voice echoed in my head. Balance, precision, and never hesitate. Corvin's head hit the floor with a wet thud. The other guards backed away, suddenly a lot less confident. "Anyone else want to discuss my family's business arrangements?" I asked, wiping blood off my hands. Apparently not. Getting 47 traumatized children out of a warehouse into safety should have been impossible. But fear and rage make you capable of amazing things. I loaded them into stolen wagons, drove them to the garrison, and dumped the whole mess on Captain Vex's doorstep. "Sweet merciful gods," he breathed, staring at the kids. "Where did you find them?" "Warehouse 12 in the dock district," I said. "And Captain, you might want to prepare for some very angry nobles." He looked at me with something like respect. "You know this means war, don't you, Lady Blackthorne?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm counting on it." The confrontation happened that night in our family's sacred shrine where generations of Blackthorns had sworn their oaths. Father was waiting for me, along with the family contracts that bound our bloodline to its ancient privileges. "You foolish, foolish girl," he said. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Saved 47 children from being sold like livestock," I replied. "Seemed like the right thing to do." "The right thing?" His voice rose. "You've destroyed everything our family has built. Do you think our wealth, our position, our power just magically appeared? Everything we have is built on making the hard choices, the necessary sacrifices. You mean built on the bodies of dead children. Built on understanding that some people matter more than others." He grabbed the contracts, holding them up like shields. "These represent 800 years of Blackthorne legacy, 800 years of your ancestors' sacrifices so that you could live in comfort and safety. And all I had to do was let some kids get sold into slavery. What a bargain." Father's face went purple. "You ungrateful little—" "I'm done." I walked over to the shrine's eternal flame. "I'm done pretending our family's honor means anything when it's built on horror." "Lyra, don't you dare!" I threw the contracts into the fire, and the ancient parchments went up like they were soaked in oil, taking 8 centuries of accumulated wealth and privilege with them. The magical bindings that tied our family to its holdings, its titles, its power. All of it burned. "You're no daughter of mine," Father whispered, his voice broken. "Good," I said, watching our legacy turn to ash. "I never want to be." That's when the assassins attacked. Apparently, burning the family contracts was the equivalent of declaring war on every noble house that had business dealings with us. Which, it turned out, was most of them. I fought my way out of that shrine with nothing but Mother's hidden training and pure spite. By the time the smoke cleared, there were 6 dead assassins and 1 very much alive ex-noble daughter covered in blood and ash. Father found me there, still clutching Corvin's severed head like a trophy. "Look what you've become," he said, his voice full of disgust. "A savage, a killer, a disgrace to everything noble about our bloodline." I looked down at my hands, stained with blood and soot, then back at him. "You're right," I said. "I am a disgrace, and I'm just getting started." 3 months later, I was standing in the mud at Fort Ironhold, the Empire's most miserable frontier outpost, getting screamed at by a sergeant who looked like he'd been carved out of granite. "What's your name, recruit?" he bellowed in my face. "Lyra Ashbourne," I replied, using the identity papers I'd forged. The name felt right somehow, born from ash, risen from ruin. "Well, Ashbourne, you look like a stiff breeze could knock you over. What makes you think you can survive out here?" I met his glare without flinching. "Try me and find out." Sergeant Kane, that was the Granite Man's name, actually smiled at that. Not a nice smile, mind you, more like a shark spotting chum in the water. "We'll see about that, Princess." If he only knew, the other recruits were a mixed bunch. Farm boys looking for steady pay, city rats trying to escape debt, and the occasional desperate fool who thought military service would be an adventure. Most of them lasted about a week before washing out. I lasted because I had something they didn't. A very personal understanding of what real monsters looked like, and they wore silk instead of armor. "You fight like you've got training," observed Marcus Steele after I'd put him on his ass during hand-to-hand practice. He was older than the other recruits, maybe 25, with intelligent eyes and scars that suggested he'd seen real combat before. "I fight like I want to live," I corrected, helping him up. "Same thing, I suppose." He dusted himself off, studying me with uncomfortable intensity. "You're not like the others." "How so?" "For one thing, you don't flinch when Kane screams. Most recruits either cower or try to scream back. You just absorb it." I shrugged. "I've heard worse." That was an understatement. After growing up with father's ice-cold disappointment, Kane's bellowing was practically soothing. Marcus became my closest friend in those early weeks, which should have been my first warning. In my experience, when something seems too good to be true, it's usually because someone's trying to kill you. Our first real test came during the Bloodmere campaign, a simple operation to clear out bandits who'd been raiding supply caravans. We were supposed to be backup for the main force, staying safely behind the lines while the real soldiers did the fighting. Of course, nothing ever goes according to plan. "Contact front!" someone screamed as arrows started raining down on our convoy. These weren't bandits. Bandits don't move in coordinated formations or use military-grade equipment. These were professional soldiers dressed as raiders, and they'd been waiting for us. Lieutenant Crassus, our commanding officer, immediately went to pieces. "Fall back! Everyone fall back!" "Back to where?" Marcus demanded. "They've got us surrounded." He was right. The attack had been perfectly planned to trap us in a narrow valley with no escape routes. Someone had sold us out. "We need to break through their eastern flank," I said, studying the enemy positions. "It's their weakest point." "Who asked you, recruit?" Crassus snapped. "We're following protocol." "Protocol is going to get us all killed," I shot back. That's when I noticed Lieutenant Crassus checking his pocket watch with the nervous intensity of a man waiting for something specific to happen. Something like making sure all the witnesses were dead before a certain time. "You bastard," I breathed. "You set us up." His hand went to his sword. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "The hell you don't." I drew my own blade. "How much did they pay you?" "Enough," he said, and lunged at me. Here's the thing about Mother's training. It wasn't designed for honorable duels. It was designed for killing people quickly and efficiently. Crassus was dead before he hit the ground. His throat opened in a precise cut that severed both his windpipe and his carotid artery. The other soldiers stared at me in shock. "Well," I demanded, "are we going to stand here and die, or are we going to fight our way out?" Marcus was the first to respond. "What do you need us to do?" What followed was less a battle and more a lesson in applied violence. I used every dirty trick Mother had ever taught me, combined with half-remembered tactical manuals I'd read in Father's library. We hit their eastern flank like a hammer, scattered their formation, and carved our way through their lines. By the time we reached safety, 47 soldiers were dead, but the remaining 15 were alive, because I'd refused to let them die. "How did you know Crassus was dirty?" Marcus asked as we made camp that night. "The watch," I said. "He kept checking it. Men don't worry about punctuality when they're about to die, unless they're expecting to survive." "And you knew how to read their formation, how to identify their weak points?" I looked at him sharply. "What are you getting at?" Nothing, he said quickly. Just, you're full of surprises, Lyra Ashbourne. Yeah, I was starting to think he was full of surprises too. When we got back to Fort Ironhold, everything changed. Word of our heroic survival had reached the higher-ups, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about the mysterious recruit who'd saved the day. Promoted to lieutenant, Kane announced, tossing me the new insignia. Congratulations, Ashbourne. Try not to let it go to your head. What about the inquiry into Crassus? I asked. Kane's expression darkened. What inquiry? Far as anyone knows, Crassus died heroically defending his men. End of story. But he was working with... End of story, Kane repeated firmly. You want some advice, Lieutenant? In this army, sometimes it's better to win than to be right. I was starting to understand that the corruption went a lot deeper than one traitorous officer, which meant I needed to be very, very careful about who I trusted. Unfortunately, I had already made that mistake. You're getting paranoid, Marcus said as we shared a bottle of truly terrible wine in my new quarters. I'm getting realistic, I corrected. 3 more officers have died under suspicious circumstances in the past month. All of them were asking questions about supply routes and prisoner transfers. Officers die in wars, Lyra. It's an occupational hazard. I fixed him with a stare. Captain Hendricks died of food poisoning 2 days after discovering irregularities in the prisoner transport logs. Major Voss had a riding accident the morning he was supposed to meet with investigators from the capital. Colonel Marsh's tent accidentally caught fire while he was sleeping, right after he started tracking missing war orphans. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You think someone's silencing them. I think someone's running a very profitable operation and they don't like being investigated. And you think that someone might come after you next. I think, I said carefully, that I've been asking a lot of the same questions they were asking. What I didn't tell him was that I'd been doing more than asking questions. I'd been following the money. Mother's journals, hidden in the secret compartment of her jewelry box, had taught me more than just how to kill people. They'd taught me how to think like a spy, how to track information, how to see patterns others missed. The pattern here was elegant in its simplicity. The Empire's frontier wars created a steady supply of orphans and prisoners. Those orphans and prisoners disappeared into a network of shell companies and false identities, and the profits from their sale flowed back into the pockets of the very nobles who were supposed to be protecting them. It was my family's operation, scaled up and militarized. I need to show you something, I said, pulling out a map I'd been working on. Look at these supply routes. Marcus studied the marked paths, his expression growing increasingly grim. These don't lead to orphanages or prison camps. No, they lead to private estates, mining operations, and other facilities. Other facilities? I pointed to a cluster of marks near the eastern border. Brothels, fighting pits. Places where desperate people pay good money for entertainment. His face went white. How many children are we talking about? Based on the transport logs I've been able to access, thousands. Marcus stared at the map for a long time. What are you going to do? Same thing I did before, burn it all down. Lyra, his voice was strained. You can't fight an entire conspiracy by yourself. Watch me. That's when I made my second mistake. I trusted him with the location of my evidence cache. 2 days later, everything was gone. Months of careful investigation, documented proof of the conspiracy, names and dates and financial records. All of it had vanished from my supposedly secure hiding place. There were only 3 people who knew where I kept those documents. Me, myself, and Marcus. I'm sorry, he said when I confronted him. We were alone in the armory, surrounded by weapons that suddenly seemed a lot more relevant to our conversation. How long? I asked. Since the beginning. His voice was barely a whisper. I was assigned to watch you before you even enlisted. By who? Your father. I felt something cold and sharp twist in my chest. Of course. He couldn't let his disgraced daughter just disappear, could he? He had to keep tabs on me. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Marcus said desperately. I was just supposed to report on your activities, make sure you weren't causing trouble, but then I got to know you and... And what? You fell in love with the mark? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How romantic. Yes, he said simply. I did. Well, congratulations. You're an excellent spy. I actually believed you gave a damn about me. I do give a damn about you. His voice cracked. Why do you think I'm telling you this now instead of just disappearing? Because your conscience finally kicked in? Because you realized you were working for monsters? Because, he said quietly, your father ordered me to kill you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? 3 days ago. He sent new orders through the usual channels. You've become too dangerous to leave alive. I'm supposed to stage an accident during our next patrol. I drew my sword. And you're telling me this because I'd rather die than hurt you. Marcus made no move to defend himself as I pressed the blade to his throat. One quick cut, and all my problems would be solved. He'd betrayed me, sold me out, lied to me for months. He deserved to die. But his eyes held no fear, only resignation and something that might have been relief. Damn you, I whispered, lowering the sword. Damn you for making this complicated. I'm sorry, he said again. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't bring back the children who died because my evidence disappeared. Sorry doesn't... I kept copies. I stared at him. What? I kept copies of everything, hidden where your father can't find them. He pulled a key from around his neck. Storage room 17 in the old barracks. Everything you need to expose the conspiracy is there. Why? Because some things are more important than orders. Because those children deserve justice. Because... He looked at me with an expression so raw it hurt to see. Because I love you, and I want to be worthy of that, and I wanted to trust him. God's help me. I wanted to believe him so badly it was like a physical ache. But trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. If you're lying to me again, I said quietly, I will kill you slowly. I know. And if you're telling the truth and you really do have that evidence, then we burn it all down, he said. Together. Against my better judgment, I believed him. Storage room 17 contained everything he'd promised and more. Not just my stolen evidence, but additional documents he'd gathered during his months of spying. Financial records that traced the conspiracy all the way to the imperial court, names of every noble family involved, detailed accounts of their operations. And at the center of it all, coordinating everything, was my dear father. He's not just part of the conspiracy, Marcus said as we reviewed the documents. He's running it. The entire network reports to him. Of course he is. I felt that familiar cold rage settling in my chest. He couldn't stand losing control when I burned the family contracts. So he built himself a new empire. Built on the same foundation, Marcus observed. Dead children and broken lives. Yeah, well, I started gathering the most damning documents. Time to tear it down again. Lyra, wait. He caught my arm. If we do this, there's no going back. These people have money, power, connections. They'll come after us with everything they have. Let them come. They'll destroy us. I looked at him with a smile that probably should have frightened him. They can try. Exposing a conspiracy is harder than you might think. You can't just post the evidence on a bulletin board and expect justice to magically happen. Especially when the people you're trying to expose control most of the bulletin boards. But you know what they say, if you can't beat the system, become the system. General Thorne wants to see you, Kane announced one morning, looking like he'd rather be delivering news of his own execution. General Mordecai Thorne was a legend in the Imperial Army. Brilliant tactician, fearless leader, completely incorruptible. He was also, according to Marcus's intelligence, one of the few high-ranking officers who wasn't part of the conspiracy, which made him either our salvation or our doom. Lieutenant Ashbourne, Thorne said as I entered his office. He was a small man with intelligent eyes and hands that showed the calluses of someone who'd fought his way up from the ranks. Please sit. I sat, trying to project confidence while internally calculating the distance to the nearest exit. I've been reading reports about you, he continued. Impressive record, unconventional tactics. A talent for turning desperate situations into victories. Thank you, sir. I'm particularly interested in your theories about supply chain irregularities. My blood went cold. Sir? Oh, don't look so worried. I'm not here to have you arrested. He leaned back in his chair. I'm here to offer you a promotion. A promotion? Colonel, my new intelligence officer. Congratulations. I stared at him. Sir, I don't understand. Let me be more direct then. He pulled out a file and opened it. Your real name is Lyra Blackthorne. You're the disgraced daughter of Lord Aldrich Blackthorne, one of the Empire's most influential nobles. You burned your family's ancient contracts to save a group of war orphans, got yourself disowned, and enlisted in the army under a false identity. Sir, I can explain. No need. I know exactly why you did it. He pulled out another document. Because you discovered that your family was involved in trafficking those orphans. My mouth went dry. How do you? Because I've been investigating the same conspiracy for the past 2 years. He smiled grimly. And I could use someone with your particular insights. It turns out that General Thorne had been building his own case against the trafficking network, but he'd been operating at a disadvantage. The conspiracy had people everywhere, including his own staff. He needed someone they wouldn't suspect, someone who could move freely and gather intelligence. Someone like a disgraced noble with a very personal grudge. Your assignment, he said, is to attend a series of diplomatic functions in the capital. Lord Blackthorne, your father, will be there, along with most of the other conspirators. You'll be posing as my aide, which should give you access to their private meetings. You want me to spy on my own father. I want you to gather evidence that will put him and his associates in prison for the rest of their lives. And if he recognizes me? Thorne's smile was sharp as a blade. Then I suppose you'll have to be very convincing. The capital was exactly as I remembered. Beautiful, corrupt, and crawling with people who'd sell their own mothers for the right price. The diplomatic reception was being held at the Crescent Palace, where all the Empire's most powerful families gathered to plot and scheme in elegant surroundings. I'd disguise myself as thoroughly as possible. Different hair color, subtle makeup, and the kind of military bearing that screamed career soldier rather than runaway noble. But I was still taking a massive risk. Nervous? Marcus asked as we approached the palace gates. He'd been assigned as my bodyguard for the evening, a role that let him carry weapons and stay close to me. Terrified, I admitted. If this goes wrong, it won't go wrong. You can't know that. I can know that I won't let anything happen to you. His voice was fierce. I owe you that much. The reception was in full swing by the time we arrived. Lords and ladies in silk and jewels, making polite conversation while plotting each other's destruction. Just like old times. I spotted Father immediately. He was holding court near the wine table, regaling a group of sycophants with some probably fabricated war story. He looked older, grayer, but still carried himself with that familiar, arrogant confidence. Lord Blackthorne, General Thorne said, approaching with me in tow. Allow me to introduce my new intelligence officer, Colonel Ashbourne. Father's eyes swept over me dismissively. Colonel, a pleasure. The pleasure is mine, my lord. I kept my voice carefully neutral, professional. I've heard so much about your family's contributions to the Empire. Have you? His attention focused on me more sharply. And what exactly have you heard? Only good things, I assure you. Your charitable work with war orphans, particularly... Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, suspicion. It was impossible to tell. Yes, well, one does what one can. He turned back to Thorne. General, I was hoping we could discuss the situation on the Eastern Front. Perhaps privately? Of course, Colonel Ashbourne. Please wait here. As they moved away, I caught sight of Marcus positioning himself near the serving staff. He'd managed to blend in perfectly, just another soldier doing his job. But I wasn't the only one watching him. Lord Vex, one of Father's associates, was studying Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. I recognized the look. It was the same way a hunter studied prey. Excuse me, I said to a passing servant. I need to powder my nose. The servant pointed me toward a corridor lined with portraits of dead emperors. I slipped away from the crowd, my heart pounding. Something was wrong. The whole evening felt like a trap, but I couldn't figure out who was supposed to be caught in it. That's when I heard voices from behind a partially open door. Sure it's her, Father's voice tense with anxiety. Positive. Lord Vex sounded smugly satisfied. Lyra Blackthorne, back from the dead. though she's calling herself Ashbourne now. Clever girl. How long have you known? Since she walked in the door, she looks just like her mother at that age. My blood turned to ice. Mother. They were talking about mother. The question is, Vex continued, what do we do about it? What we should have done years ago. Father's voice was cold as winter. Eliminate the problem permanently. And her companion, the one posing as her bodyguard? Marcus Steele. He's been feeding us information for months, though I suspect his loyalties may have shifted. Shifted how? He was supposed to kill her weeks ago. The fact that she's still alive suggests he's either incompetent or compromised. Probably both. Should we activate the backup plan? Yes, tonight. Make it look like an accident. I'd heard enough. I started to back away from the door, but froze when I heard Father's next words. And Vex, make sure you recover the documents first. We can't afford to have them surface later. Documents. They knew about our evidence cache. I turned to run and found myself face to face with two palace guards. Colonel Ashbourne? One of them said politely. Lord Blackthorne would like a word. The word Lord Blackthorne wanted turned out to be a very pointed conversation in a private study lined with weapons and torture implements. Apparently, the palace had interesting ideas about interior decorating. Hello, daughter, Father said as the guards forced me into a chair. It's been too long. Not long enough, I replied, testing the ropes binding my wrists. Professional work, unfortunately. Still defiant, I see. I'd hoped military service might have taught you discipline. It taught me plenty, like how to identify corrupt officers who sell children to the highest bidder. Father backhanded me across the face. The blow sent stars dancing across my vision, but I'd had worse. You always were ungrateful, he said. Do you have any idea what you cost me when you burned those contracts? 800 years of accumulated wealth and power, gone in a single act of juvenile rebellion. Best thing I ever did. Perhaps. But fortunately, I'm a resourceful man. It took time, but I managed to rebuild what you destroyed. Better, in fact, more profitable. More profitable because you're selling children instead of just exploiting them. I'm providing a service to the Empire. Wars create orphans. Orphans need homes. I simply ensure they find them. In brothels and fighting pits, in whatever capacity they're best suited for. He shrugged. Supply and demand, my dear. Basic economics. I wanted to vomit. You're talking about children. I'm talking about resources. The Empire has always depended on the wise allocation of resources. Where's Marcus? Father smiled. Your lover? He's being dealt with as we speak. Though I must say, I'm disappointed in him. He was supposed to kill you weeks ago. Maybe he realized he was working for a monster. Maybe he realized he was in love with one. Before I could ask what he meant by that, the door opened and Lord Vex entered, dragging a bloody and unconscious Marcus behind him. Ah, excellent timing, Father said. Now we can have a proper family reunion. Vex dumped Marcus in a chair next to mine. His face was a mess of bruises and cuts, but he was breathing. Marcus, I whispered. Marcus, wake up. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and pained. Lyra, what? Both of you shut up, Father snapped. We have business to discuss. He moved to a table covered with documents, the evidence we'd so carefully gathered. All of it was there, including things I'd never seen before. Impressive work, he said, sorting through the papers. Months of investigation, detailed financial records, names and dates. You've built quite a case against me. Against all of you, I corrected. Yes, well, it's a shame no one will ever see it. General Thorne knows what I tell him to know. Father's smile was poisonous. Did you really think I'd let you get close to him without having leverage? The good general has some very interesting gambling debts. My heart sank. You're lying. Am I? How do you think we knew exactly where to find your evidence cache? How do you think we knew about tonight's little spy mission? Marcus stirred beside me, blood trickling from his mouth. Thorne sold us out? Everyone has a price, my boy, even incorruptible war heroes. The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. We'd been played from the beginning. Every move we'd made, every plan we'd hatched, it had all been anticipated. So what now? I asked. You kill us and bury the evidence? Kill you? My dear daughter, I'm hurt. Family is family, after all. Since when do you care about family? Since I realized you might actually be useful. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. You've proven yourself quite capable. Cunning, ruthless, effective. All qualities I value. Get to the point. Join me. I stared at him. What? Come back to the family business. Help me run it. Think of the good you could do, ensuring the children go to decent homes instead of the less savory establishments. You want me to help you traffic children? I want you to help me save the empire. His voice took on that persuasive tone he'd always used when he wanted something. The frontier wars are bleeding us dry. The treasury is nearly empty. This operation provides funding for the military, infrastructure, everything that keeps the empire strong. Built on slavery. Built on pragmatism. The children would die in the streets otherwise. At least this way, they serve a purpose. I looked at Marcus, who was watching me with something like hope in his eyes. Did he think I might actually consider this? And if I refuse, then you and your lover die tonight. Your evidence disappears and the operation continues without you. The children keep disappearing, the money keeps flowing, and nothing changes except that two more idealists are feeding the worms. Some choice. It's the only choice you get. I thought about those 47 children I'd saved from the warehouse, now living safely in an orphanage in the capital. I thought about Cassius, bleeding out on my bedroom floor. I thought about Mother, executed for trying to stop this exact same kind of operation. I need some time to think. You have until dawn, then I need an answer. Father stood up, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves. Guards will be posted outside. Don't try anything foolish. After he left, Marcus and I sat in silence for a long time. Are you actually considering it? He finally asked. I'm considering our options, I replied, which appear to be limited. Lyra, you can't seriously? Can't what? Can't try to find a way to save both of us and still expose this conspiracy? There is no way. Your father's right. We're dead either way. Maybe, or maybe there's a third option. What third option? I smiled, testing the knots on my wrists again. The one where we burn everything down and walk away. It took me 3 hours to work my hands free. Mother's lessons had included more than just combat training. She'd also taught me some very useful skills about escaping from restraints. Marcus was still unconscious when I finally slipped out of my chair. The guards outside were probably expecting us to try the door, so I went with the window instead. The palace was built on a cliff overlooking the harbor, which made climbing down a challenge. But I'd spent my childhood scrambling over the walls of Blackthorne Manor, and the principles were the same. It took me another hour to reach the old barracks where we'd hidden our backup evidence. The real backup. The one I hadn't told Marcus about because I'd learned not to trust anyone completely. Storage room 23 contained everything I needed. Detailed financial records, shipping manifests, correspondence between the conspirators, and most importantly, magical communication crystals that would broadcast whatever I said across the entire empire. Because here's the thing about burning down a conspiracy. You don't do it quietly. I activated the crystals and began reading the evidence aloud, name by name, crime by crime. Every noble family involved in trafficking children, every military officer taking bribes, every official looking the other way. And at the center of it all, Lord Aldrich Blackthorne, selling children to fund his private empire. The broadcast lasted 2 hours. By the time I was finished, every communication crystal in the empire had carried my voice into taverns, manor houses, military barracks, and palace chambers. There was no taking it back now. I was halfway back to the palace when the explosion started. Apparently, when you publicly expose a conspiracy involving half the empire's nobility, people have strong reactions. The capital was in chaos. Angry crowds had gathered outside several manor houses, demanding justice. Military units were moving through the streets, though it wasn't clear whose orders they were following. And smoke was rising from at least 3 different districts. I fought my way through the riots using every shortcut and back alley I remembered from my childhood. The palace was under siege. Literally. A company of Imperial guards had surrounded it, but they were facing off against another company that was defending it. Civil war, in other words, just what the Empire needed. I found General Thorne in the palace courtyard, very much not looking like a man who'd been bought and paid for by my father. "Colonel Ashbourne," he called when he saw me. "Thank the gods you're alive. Where's Steele?" "Still inside, probably dead." I drew my sword as palace guards moved to surround us. "Unless you're planning to arrest me?" "Arrest you? You just handed me enough evidence to hang half the nobility. Why would I arrest you?" "Because my father said you were working for him." Thorne's expression darkened. "Your father says a lot of things, most of them lies." That's when I realized what had happened. Father had been playing a deeper game than I'd understood. He'd never controlled Thorne. He'd just wanted me to think he did, to make me feel helpless and desperate enough to accept his offer. Unfortunately for him, I'd never been very good at accepting things. "Orders, sir," I asked. "Secure the palace, arrest everyone on your list, and try not to kill anyone unless they really deserve it." Define really deserve it. "Anyone who tries to kill you first." I grinned. "I can work with that." The palace guards weren't prepared for someone who fought like an assassin but thought like a general. I used their own defensive positions against them, turning their strongholds into traps. Most of them surrendered once they realized the Empire's most powerful general was backing my play. The smart ones, anyway. The stupid ones died. I found Father in his private study, burning documents as fast as he could feed them to the fireplace. "Lyra," he said without turning around, "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Hello, Father. Busy evening." "You could say that." He turned to face me, and I was surprised to see him smiling. "I have to admit I'm impressed. That broadcast was masterfully done." "Thank you. Where's Marcus?" "Safe. I had him moved when the fighting started." "Why?" Father shrugged. "Professional courtesy. He's a good agent, even if his loyalties have become confused." "He's not your agent anymore." "No, I suppose not." He gestured to the burning papers. "You realize this doesn't end anything, don't you? You've exposed one network, but there are others. The Empire runs on corruption, my dear. It always has. Then maybe it's time for a new empire." "And who's going to build it? You?" He laughed. "You're a soldier, Lyra. A very good one, apparently, but still just a soldier. You don't understand politics, economics, the delicate balance that keeps civilization functioning. I understand right and wrong. Right and wrong are luxuries for people who don't have to make the hard choices." I drew my sword. "You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and trafficking in human beings." "Am I?" He pulled out a dagger of his own. "And who's going to arrest me?" "You. If necessary. You'd kill your own father? You killed my brother. Cassius was weak. He would have destroyed everything. Cassius was good, something you never understood." Father lunged at me with surprising speed for a man his age, but I'd been expecting it. The fight was brief and vicious, and it ended with him on the floor, bleeding from a dozen wounds. "You were always my greatest disappointment," he whispered as his life ebbed away. "And my greatest pride." "Save it," I said, but he was already dead. I found Marcus in the palace dungeons, beaten but alive. He looked up when I opened his cell door, and his face went through about 6 different emotions in as many seconds. "Lyra, but how—" "Long story. Can you walk?" "I think so." He struggled to his feet, wincing. "Is it over?" "This part is. The trials will take months, and there are probably other networks we haven't found yet, but yeah, this part is over." "And us?" I looked at him for a long moment. He'd lied to me, betrayed me, and nearly gotten me killed. He'd also saved my life, helped me expose a massive conspiracy, and chosen love over duty when it mattered most. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to find out." 3 months later, I was standing in the Imperial throne room, wearing a general's uniform that still felt strange and uncomfortable. Emperor Maximilian himself was pinning the medals to my chest while half the court watched. "General Ashbourne," he said formally, "the Empire owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "Just doing my job, Your Majesty." "Your job?" He smiled. "My dear General, exposing massive corruption and preventing civil war is somewhat above and beyond the call of duty." With respect, Your Majesty, protecting innocent people should always be part of the job. After the ceremony, I walked out onto the palace balcony overlooking the city. The capital was rebuilding, slowly but surely. The trafficking networks had been dismantled, the corrupt officials imprisoned or executed, and new laws were being written to prevent it from happening again. Marcus found me there, looking much better than he had 3 months ago. "Enjoying the view, General?" he asked. "Still getting used to the title," I admitted. "General Lyra Ashbourne. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" I preferred lieutenant personally. Less responsibility. "Too bad, you're a colonel now, whether you like it or not." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the city. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. I thought about it. About exposing the conspiracy? No. About my father? No. About burning the family contracts and becoming a disgrace to noble society? And best decision I ever made. Even though it cost you everything? I looked at him, then at the city below where children were sleeping safely in their beds instead of being sold to the highest bidder. "I didn't lose everything," I said. "I found something better." "What's that?" "A purpose worth fighting for." Marcus smiled. "And what happens now?" "Now? Now we make sure this never happens again. We build an army that protects people instead of exploiting them. We create a system where justice matters more than bloodlines." That's ambitious. I'm an ambitious woman. "Yes," he said, taking my hand. "You are." 5 years later, I'm standing in the ruins of Blackthorne Manor, watching workmen convert the old slave quarters into dormitories for war orphans. The irony isn't lost on me. The Ashbourne Foundation for War Orphans is my current project, a network of schools and training centers that give displaced children real opportunities instead of just survival. It's funded entirely by the assets seized from the trafficking conspiracy, which means my father is inadvertently paying for the education of the very children he would have sold. I like to think he'd hate that. "General," one of the workmen approaches, looking nervous. "We found something you should see." He leads me to what used to be Father's private study, where they've been tearing down walls to make room for a library. Behind a hidden panel, they've discovered a small chamber containing documents, weapons, and a portrait I haven't seen in years. Mother, young, beautiful, and holding a baby that must be me. But it's not the portrait that stops my breath, it's the letter tucked behind it, written in a handwriting I recognize. "My dearest Lyra, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened and I'm gone. I want you to know that everything I taught you, the dancing lessons, the etiquette training, all of it, was preparation for this day. Your father isn't the man I married. Power corrupted him, slowly but surely, until he became something monstrous. I tried to stop him, but I underestimated his ruthlessness. You're stronger than I was, smarter, more determined. If anyone can tear down what he's built and create something better, it's you. The weapons cache behind the eastern wall of your room contains everything you'll need. The journals will teach you what I couldn't. And remember, sometimes being a disgrace to a corrupt family is the highest honor you can achieve. All my love, Mother. P.S. Your brother knows nothing of this. Keep him safe if you can, but don't let his safety stop you from doing what's right." I fold the letter carefully, tears blurring my vision. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known exactly what would happen and prepared me for it. "General," the workman looks concerned. "Are you all right?" "Fine," I manage, "just old memories." As I'm leaving the manor, another surprise waits for me in the courtyard. A young man with familiar eyes and a scar across his left cheek is standing next to my horse. "Hello, sister," Cassius says quietly. I drop the letter and stare at him. "You're dead. I saw you die." "You saw me nearly die?" Father's blade missed my heart by inches. He pulls back his shirt to show a vicious scar. "Captain Vex smuggled me out of the city before Father could finish the job." "But why?" "Because I was more useful to them as a martyr than as a witness. Dead brothers make convenient motivation for revenge." His smile is bitter. "They underestimated your capacity for justice over vengeance. You've been alive this whole time? Alive and gathering evidence. Turns out the trafficking network extended a lot further than we realized. I've spent 5 years tracking down every last connection. And And I think it's time we finished what Mother started. I look at my brother, older now, scarred but alive, and feel something settle into place in my chest. Together? I ask. Together. We mount our horses and ride toward the capital, where a new kind of empire is being built. One founded on justice instead of exploitation, on merit instead of bloodlines, on truth instead of convenient lies. My family thought I was a disgrace. They were right. I was a disgrace to everything they represented, and I couldn't be prouder of that fact. Behind us, Blackthorne Manor burns for the second time in my life. This time, I'm the one who lit the match. Some things are worth burning for,